Hi, everybody. It's Laurie White with the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, back with episode number 157 of Chamber TV. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with General Treasurer Seth Magaziner, who all of you know is now running for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District. Good morning, Treasurer Magaziner. How are you?
Well, good morning, Laurie. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great, and it's really nice to be back.
Fantastic. So you have been our guest numerous times on Chamber TV. So I can think of at least a half a dozen occasions where we've had the opportunity to chat over the last couple of years about all kinds of issues relative to pension reform, relative to COVID, relative to the work that you are doing on school construction and the infrastructure bank. So it's really great to be able to talk to you today in the context of your candidacy for Congressional District seat number 2. So how is the campaign going?
It's going great. We are running on an economic message. My priority as treasurer for the last 8 years has always been to improve financial security and economic opportunity for all Rhode Islanders, and that's what I'm going to fight for in Congress. We need leaders in Washington who can cut through the nonsense, get things done, deliver results on issues like education and workforce training, lowering the cost of healthcare, transitioning to a clean energy economy, and creating good jobs in the process. So these are the issues that I've been working on for the last 7.5 years as state treasurer, and I look forward to advocating for those same issues on behalf of Rhode Islanders in Congress.
So it's interesting. You bring up the distinction between what you're working on the state level and transitioning that portfolio of work to a larger scale. So give us a sense of what it was like to make the decision um, to move over into the federal arena. And do you see that that your scope of work will change at all at a national level?
Yeah. Well, I've always made every decision through the lens of how can I best deliver positive results for Rhode Islanders. And when Congressman Langevin unexpectedly announced his retirement, I knew that this was the way that I could best deliver for Rhode Island and expand economic opportunity in our state. I just think what's happening in Washington is so important. What's happening in Washington has a direct impact on Rhode Islanders' ability to get good jobs, to send their kids to good schools, to afford the cost of healthcare. And we've been lucky in Rhode Island historically. We've had a federal delegation that has done a good job of delivering critical resources back to Rhode Island, supporting the offshore wind industry, for example, and our ports, supporting the defense industry, which is hugely important to Rhode Island, supporting small businesses. And I'm excited to continue in that vein. The priorities are the same. Rhode Islanders want leaders who are going to fight for a stronger economy and better schools for their kids and a clean environment. I've been doing that for the last 7 years as treasurer, and I'm going to be fighting for those same priorities now in Congress if the voters will have me there. And one of the things that I think suits me especially well to serve the 2nd District is that for the last 7.5 years as treasurer, I have been all across District 2 in every community, talking to people, hearing their concerns, working with people to solve problems, fixing schools. Our school construction program is building new elementary schools in Cranston and Johnston and making major repairs in Warwick. Our infrastructure bank work has had an impact in almost every community in the district. And so I know that I can be an effective voice for the 2nd Congressional District in Rhode Island because I've spent so much time working with people in every community across District 2 for the last 7.5 years. And I look forward to continuing in that work.
It's interesting that when you're a general elected official statewide um, in Rhode Island, it seems to me that you might find it more satisfying to be able to develop a list of things that need to get done and impact and programs and direct service. I'm wondering if you think your work in Congress would be more attenuated and it would be a slightly different shift in how to make change and make progress when you have 434 additional colleagues in order to really be able to make change, pass legislation, and to make a difference.
Well, we have in the last 7.5 years done some very consequential things to help Rhode Islanders from the Treasurer's Office. But I didn't do any of those things alone. So in all of the things that we've gotten done for Rhode Islanders over the last 7 years, we needed partners, including legislative partners. So when we passed the school construction program, for example, we convened a task force of experts, and you were very involved in that yourself, Laurie, in putting a plan together to make this once-in-a-generation investment, repairing schools all across the state. We worked with the General Assembly and Governor Raimondo to get it passed. And since then, that school construction program has allocated $1.5 billion to repairing or replacing 189 schools, a majority of the public school buildings in Rhode Island. The point I'm making, though, is that I didn't do that by myself. We did this through a coalition with a lot of people who cared about it, including our legislative partners. So I do think that we'll be able to get things done in Congress that deliver real results for Rhode Island, because I have that experience of working collaboratively with people here in the State House from all walks of life to advance good policies. So, I'll bring that experience to Washington as well.
Question about how you feel the environment is in DC these days, and as you know, we've been interviewing all of the candidates that are seeking the CD2 spot, and I'm asking everybody, like, what would you bring to the party, if you will, the party as in the larger happening? How would you bring a point of view or a set of practices or a discipline or a mindset that would break down what we're seeing as tremendous polarization?
Well, you're right. The country is very polarized right now. And in my experience, there are two kinds of people in politics. There are people who, are showboats and care about getting lots of likes on social media and getting themselves on TV all the time. And then there are people who actually roll up their sleeves and try to get things done. And that's always been my style. As state treasurer, I'm not in it for the attention. I'm not in it for the accolades. I just care about producing results. And I think it's that results-oriented mindset that I'll bring to Washington. At the end of the day, I will work with anybody, left, right, center, if it means that we can have good jobs and good schools here in Rhode Island. So I think what I bring is a temperament that's pragmatic and results-oriented. And I bring a track record of actually getting it done. I don't doubt, you reference other candidates in the race. I don't doubt that everybody who's running is running for good reasons and wants to do good things for Rhode Island, and I commend them for that. But I think what sets me apart is that I have a track record of actually delivering results all across District 2 for the last 7.5 years on things like fixing schools, developing clean energy, managing the pension system to an all-time high so that 60,000 Rhode Islanders can have stronger retirement security. So when I say that I know how to produce results and get things done, voters know that's true because I have shown that I can do that over the last 7.5 years.
What do you think voters are looking for in 2022?
I think they want people who are going to focus on core economic issues. People are worried about the cost of living going up. They're worried that their incomes aren't going to keep up with the bills that they're paying. They're worried about the quality of their kids' schools. And so I think what they're looking for is they're looking for results-oriented people to represent them in Washington who can actually produce results on those core economic issues. And those are the same issues that I've been working on as treasurer for the last 7 years.
How can a member of Congress, or how can Congress as a whole influence the cost of living today? And we are experiencing unprecedented levels of inflation, and that's due to a lot of things. The COVID return from products to services, the war in Ukraine, interest rates and the actions of the Fed, supply chain congestion. Seems like a lot of issues that are out there that have come together and developed this brew that you wonder, like, are any of these individual issues solvable on their own, let alone by Congress?
There are a lot of things that Congress can and should do to help people keep up with the cost of living. I actually put an op-ed in the Providence Journal on this subject last week, ways that I think that Congress can act to help tame inflation and help people keep up with their bills. So, for example, Things like a temporary suspension of the federal gas tax is something that I support. That would save the average Rhode Islander $3 to $4 every time they go to fill up their car. Utilizing the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, transitioning to a clean energy economy so that ultimately we're not as dependent on commodity prices, the ups and downs of the commodity prices in fossil fuels, and not as beholden to autocrats like Vladimir Putin for our energy. These are all things that can make a difference. I also think we need to, take action to make it easier for people to earn a good wage and raise incomes. For example, I'm a big supporter of more federal support to expand affordable childcare and universal preschool, because not only is that good for kids, but it also makes it easier for people to go back to work and for families to have their incomes go up, and for employers to have a larger supply of people in the workforce, which is an issue that I know a lot of employers are struggling with right now. So there absolutely are things that Congress can do that can make it easier for people to keep up with the cost of living, make it easier for employers. Another big topic that we need to focus on, I think, with the rising cost of energy and the geopolitical uncertainty around Russia and Ukraine, a lot of big companies, a lot of employers are realizing that it makes good economic and financial sense to onshore their operations and their supply chains more. You see more and more companies looking to move operations and move supply lines back to the United States that had previously gone overseas. And so the federal government and Congress need to support that. If there are companies that are realizing that it makes good economic sense for their supply chains to be closer to home and not halfway around the world, then Congress should put the right conditions in place to make it easier for companies to make those changes.
Mm-hmm. Well, we hear Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo talking about what's happening in the area of chip manufacturing, chip production, and the incredible constraints that exist on that entire industry, and how we as a nation have not been able to develop our own deep capacity in chip production. Thoughts on that? And how does that happen, by the way?
It's absolutely true, and it's a very good example. And I think Secretary Raimondo, who I worked closely with when she was governor here in Rhode Island, she's making us proud down in Washington, focusing on issues like that. And so it's certainly true with chips and semiconductors, but it's true across all industries. The auto industry. I mean, all consumer goods, furniture. I think there was a move in the 80s and 90s when a lot of companies saw that they could save money by moving operations overseas. But what we're finding now is that it actually makes oftentimes better business sense to keep those supply chains closer to home so that they're less vulnerable to rising energy prices and to geopolitical uncertainty. And so Congress can through incentives, through tax credits, et cetera, make it easier for companies to bring their supply chains closer to home. That obviously will create lots of good jobs here in the United States, including in Rhode Island, but also help tame inflation by reducing input prices for companies. And I think the secretary is doing a great job on this. She just was instrumental in passing legislation to help make it easier for high-tech manufacturers to move back to the United States, and we need to continue to work to bolster those efforts.
When she came back to Rhode Island a couple of weeks ago, as you well know, to deliver a keynote address at Brown University, and she touched on this whole notion of the capacity in chip production, and talked about it's not just one siloed industry, but the fact that we haven't developed an entire ecosystem around chip development. And furthermore, she pointed out that if consumers were wondering why is it that they can't get their washing machine delivered in under 7 months, it's because of chip production and how it spreads out into other industries. So as a member of Congress, what else could you bring to the discussion to really deepen our overall capacity to be more independent, geopolitically independent in this particular sector?
Well, I think a big factor is workforce. We need to make sure that there are enough people who are trained in advanced manufacturing so that whether it's chips or other products, as those operations are moved back to the United States, and in particular, hopefully back to Rhode Island in some cases, there's a trained workforce that's ready for those jobs. And so when we did our school construction program that I helped lead a couple years ago, we put a big emphasis on career and technical education facilities so that students could get training in things like advanced manufacturing at the high school level, because there are a lot of good jobs available that don't require a 4-year degree, but do require something, some kind of deep career and technical education. I think more federal funding for CTE programs, more federal funding for community colleges would be very helpful in the onshoring, bringing back manufacturing jobs, whether it's semiconductors or a range of other industries. So that'll be a focus of mine as well.
I'd like to double back to what you said about childcare being a huge issue for employers and workers, obviously. And I couldn't agree with you more. We've done a whole host of listening tours in the past several months, asking our members to articulate some of the key issues they see around workforce, which is our salient issue for the next couple of years under our new chair, Megan Hughes. So, again, that bubbles to the surface. And you mentioned programs and certain tax credit opportunities for employers to really help to bridge the gap between the employer and the worker in terms of access to quality, affordable childcare. What specifically would that legislation look like? And do you see any similar pieces of legislation percolating in the Rhode Island General Assembly that would help to accomplish some of those?
Yes and yes. So universal preschool is high on my list. It's something that President Biden has proposed, and it's also something that here in Rhode Island, the state Senate leadership has put in legislation to accomplish over the next several years. But obviously, if we can get federal help, it'll make it more affordable for the state to do it, and also potentially accelerate the timeline. I started out my career as a public school teacher. I taught elementary school, and I can tell you from firsthand experience that early childhood education makes a huge difference in the educational development of a child from a young age. But even more than that, as we discussed, and as you noted, Laurie, having universal preschool also makes it easier for both parents to work and not have to stay home. And so if we can make preschool universal, if we can expand subsidies for childcare to make childcare more affordable, it's good not only for kids, but it's good for families because incomes will be higher if both parents are able to work. And it's good for employers too, because as you know, talk to any employer in Rhode Island right now, large, small, or in between, and almost all of them to a person will tell you that their biggest challenge right now is workforce shortages. And expanding access to preschool and childcare will make it easier for more people to enter the workforce and meet those needs.
Are there any programs that you've identified or could identify that would assist employers directly with this issue?
Yeah, so I think there's different models that can work. Some models will give employers and credits or tax incentives to help cover the cost of childcare for their employees. That's one model. Another model is for states or the federal government to offer subsidies or payments to childcare providers directly, particularly when they're serving middle and lower income families. And then universal preschool will be another one. So I think there's a range of models that can work. I look forward to getting to Congress and working with my future colleagues to find the right combination. But bottom line is it has to be a priority. It has to be a priority. If you are an employer and you're worried about workforce shortages, you should be supporting expanded childcare and universal preschool.
Wondering what your preferences and desires would be relative to committee assignments. So Congressman Cicilline staked out reputations in advanced manufacturing and also issues surrounding what's known as big tech, as you well know. Congressman Langevin is a nationally recognized cybersecurity expert. What are your big issues, or what committee assignments would you seek as a member of Congress?
Yeah, I haven't decided which committee specifically I'd want to be on, but what I do know is that I want to put myself in a position where I can deliver for Rhode Island in the biggest possible way. So when you think about the second congressional district, we are the national birthplace of the offshore wind industry. I want to put myself in a position where I can be supportive of offshore wind. We have a very important defense sector in the second congressional district, certainly with Electric Boat being the largest, now I believe the largest private employer in Rhode Island, but also a number of other businesses in the defense sector as well. So I want to put myself in a position where I can be supportive of that industry in Rhode Island, and where I can be, best positioned to deliver resources to URI, to CCRI, to RIC. All three of our public institutions of higher learning are based in the second district as well, and are important economic engines for the state. So, when it gets time to request committee assignments, what I'm going to have top of mind is where can I position myself where I can deliver the most resources for Rhode Island, and particularly resources to places that will be catalytic to the economy here in our state.
Do you see any meaningful differences between the first congressional district and the second congressional district in Rhode Island?
You know, we're a small state, and as I've talked with Congressman Langevin, Congressman Cicilline, what they both have told me is, yeah, we each represent one district, but really we've always approached it as both of us represent all of Rhode Island, and I certainly would want to continue in that mold as well. As the representative of the second congressional district, my priority, of course, would be to deliver results for that district, but I care still about the first district as well, and so I want to put myself in a position where I can benefit all of Rhode Island.
We only have a couple of minutes left, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your thoughts on what's happening in Ukraine today, and how long do you see this engagement lasting?
Well, like all Rhode Islanders, it has just been a punch to the gut for me to watch the images coming out of Ukraine. It's clear that the human rights abuses there are just beyond the pale. This is an illegal and immoral war that Vladimir Putin started, and he has the power to stop. As a new father of a 5-month-old son, it's especially jarring to see the impact on children and families. It's terrible. And I know that all Rhode Islanders stand with the people of Ukraine, who are a democratic and peaceful people whose nation was unfairly invaded. I support the strongest possible economic and diplomatic response. I don't want to see American troops in direct engagement with Russian troops, but I do support the strongest possible economic sanctions. And the good news is that this appears to be working. When the invasion first happened, I made a move to ensure that Rhode Island would get out of any and all Russian investments, because I didn't want our state to be profiting from what was going on over there. And what we're seeing right now is that the Russians are back on their heels. They've had to pull back from their attempts to invade the capital in Kyiv. They are struggling with these economic sanctions. So the most important thing is we just got to keep the pressure on, stay vigilant. The sanctions are working. The coordinated diplomatic response is working. We just have to keep it up and keep the pressure on.
Does it surprise you that the economic sanctions are, in fact, putting the Russians on their heels, given what would think their capacity is to set up parallel systems, if you will?
Yeah, I think that the Biden administration has actually done a very good job of working to isolate Russia from the global economy. But it's only been possible because of the work that has gone into building a strong diplomatic alliance that's unified against this Russian aggression. These sanctions would not be nearly as impactful if the rest of NATO, Europe, and most of the rest of the democratic world was not a part of it. So it just shows the importance of strong international alliances between democracies, and of taking a stand and being tough to do the right thing.
General Treasurer Seth Magaziner joining us here on Chamber TV, episode number 157, as part of our continuing series of discussions with those individuals that are seeking public office in 2022. We are out of time. Anything you want to leave us with, Treasurer?
No, I just want to thank you and all of your members for the work that you do to strengthen Rhode Island's economy. This is a partnership, and it's an honor to work alongside you to advance economic opportunity here in our state. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're always here if you wish to come back and talk about other issues, whether it be under your portfolio as general treasurer or as a candidate. So have a great day. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.